the wisest person I ever met in my life, a third grade dropout. Wisest and dropout in the same sentence is rather oxymoronic, like jumbo shrimp. Like fun run, ain't nothing fun about it. Like Microsoft Works, y'all don't hear me. I used to say like country music, but I've lived in Texas so long, I love country music now. I hunt, I fish, I have cowboy boots and cowboy, y'all, I'm a black neck redneck. Do you hear what I'm saying to you? No longer oxymoronic for me to say country music. And it's not oxymoronic for me to say third grade and dropout. That third grade dropout, the wisest person I ever met in my life, who taught me to combine knowledge and wisdom to make an impact, was my father. A simple cook. Wisest man I ever met in my life. Just a simple cook. Left school in the third grade to help out on the family farm, but just because he left school doesn't mean his education stopped. Mark Twain once said, "I've never allowed my schooling to get in the way of my education." My father taught himself how to read, taught himself how to write, decided in the midst of Jim Crowism, as America was breathing the last gasp of the Civil War, my father decided he was going to stand and be a man. Not a black man, not a brown man, not a white man, but a man. He literally challenged himself to be the best that he could all the days of his life. I have 4 degrees. My brother is a judge. We're not the smartest ones in our family. It's a third grade dropout daddy. A third grade dropout daddy who was quoting Michelangelo, saying to us, "Boys, I won't have a problem if you aim high and miss, but I'm gonna have a real issue if you aim low and hit." A country mother quoting Henry Ford, saying, "If you think you can or if you think you can't, you're right." I learned that from a third grade drop. Simple lessons. Lessons like these. Son, you'd rather be an hour early than a minute late. We never knew what time it was at my house because the clocks were always ahead. My mother said for nearly 30 years, my father left the house at 3:45 in the morning. One day she asked him, "Why, Daddy?" He said, "Maybe one of my boys will catch me in the act of excellence. I want to share 2 things with you." Aristotle said, "You are what you repeatedly do." Therefore, excellence ought to be a habit, not an act. Don't ever forget that. I know you're tough, but always remember to be kind. Always. Don't ever forget that. Never embarrass mama. Yeah. If mama ain't happy, ain't nobody happy. If daddy ain't happy, don't nobody care. But you know, I'm trying to tell you. Next lesson. Lesson from a cook over there in the galley. Son, make sure your servant's towel is bigger than your ego. Ego is the anesthesia that deadens the pain of stupidity. Y'all might have a relative in mind you want to send that to. Let me say it again. Ego is the anesthesia that deadens the pain of stupidity. Pride is the burden of a foolish person. John Wooden coached basketball at UCLA for a living, but his calling was to impact people. And with all those national championships, guess what he was found doing in the middle of the week? Going into the cupboard, grabbing a broom, and sweeping his own gym floor. You want to make an impact? Find your broom. Every day of your life, you find your broom. You grow your influence that way. That way you're attracting people so that you can impact them. Final lesson. Son, if you're going to do a job, do it right. I've always been told how average I can be. Always been criticized about being average. But I want to tell you something. I stand here before you, before all of these people, not listening to those words, but telling myself every single day to shoot for the stars, to be the best that I can be. Good enough isn't good enough if it can be better, and better isn't good enough if it can be best. Let me close with a very personal story that I think will bring all this into focus. Wisdom will come to you in the unlikeliest of sources, a lot of times through failure. When you hit rock bottom, remember this. While you're struggling, rock bottom can also be a great foundation on which to build and on which to grow. I'm not worried that you'll be successful. I'm worried that you won't fail from time to time. Person that gets up off the canvas and keeps growing, that's the person that will continue to grow their influence. Back in the 70s, to help me make this point, let me introduce you to someone. I met the finest woman I'd ever met in my life. Back in my day, we'd have called her a brick house. This woman was the finest woman I'd ever seen in my life. There's just one little problem. Back then, ladies didn't like big old linemen. The Blind Side hadn't come out yet. They like quarterbacks and running backs. We're at this dance, and I find out her name is Trina Williams from Lompoc, California. And we're all dancing, and we're just excited. And I decide in the middle of dancing with her that I would ask her for her phone number. Trina was the first one. Trina was the only woman in college who gave me her real telephone number. The next day, we walked to Baskin & Robbins ice cream parlor. My friends couldn't believe it. This has been 40 years ago, and my friends still can't believe it. We go on a second date, and a third date, and a fourth date. We drive from Chico to Vallejo so that she could meet my parents. My father meets her. My daddy, my hero, he meets her, pulls me to the side and says, "Is she psycho?" But anyway, we go together for a year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. By now, Trina's a senior in college. I'm still a freshman, but I'm working some things out. I'm so glad I graduated in 4 terms. Nixon, Ford, Carter, Reagan. So now it's time to propose. So I talk to her girlfriends, and it's California, it's in the 70s, so it has to be outside. You have to have a candle, and you have to have, some chocolate. And listen, I'm from the hood. I had a bottle of Boone's Farm wine. That's what I had. She said yes. That was the key. I married the most beautiful woman I'd ever seen in my life. Y'all ever been to a wedding, and even before the wedding starts, you hear this? How in the world? And it was coming from my side of the family. We get married, we have a few children, our lives are great. One day, Trina finds a lump in her left breast. Breast cancer. 6 years after that diagnosis, me and my 2 little boys walked up to Mommy's casket. And for 2 years, my heart didn't beat. If it wasn't for my faith in God, I wouldn't be standing here today. If it wasn't for those 2 little boys, there would have been no reason for which to go on. I was completely lost. That was rock bottom. You know what sustained me? The wisdom of a 3rd grade dropout. The wisdom of a simple cook. We're at the casket. I'd never seen my dad cry. But this time I saw my dad cry. That was his daughter. Trina was his daughter, not his daughter-in-law. And I'm right behind my father, about to see her for the last time on this earth. And my father shared 3 words with me that changed my life right there at the casket. It would be the last lesson he would ever teach me. He said, "Son, just stand. You keep standing. You keep standing, no matter how rough the sea, you keep standing." And I'm not talking about just water. You keep standing. No matter what, you don't give up. And as clearly as I'm talking to you today, these were some of her last words to me. She looked me in the eye and she said, "It doesn't matter to me any longer how long I live. What matters to me most is how I live." I ask y'all one question, a question that I was asked all my life by a 3rd grade dropout. How you living? How you living? Every day, ask yourself that question, how you living? Here's what a cook would suggest you to live this way. That you would not judge, that you would show up early, that you'd be kind, that you'd make sure that that servant's towel is huge and used, that if you're gonna do something, you do it the right way. That cook would tell you this, that it's never wrong to do the right thing, that how you do anything is how you do everything. And in that way, you will grow your influence to make an impact. In that way, you will honor all those who have gone before you, who have invested in you. Look in those unlikeliest places for wisdom. Enhance your life every day by seeking that wisdom and asking yourself every night, how am I living? May God richly bless y'all. Thank you for having me.
I dropped out of university, and I got dropped from the rugby team. I became a shut-in in my parents' house, unable to leave. And all of this caused me to slide into a depression. Now, these feelings lasted for months until my friends insisted that I join them to live and work in a new town for the summer. And only then did I start to feel like I was coming out of my fog. And after that summer, I made a decision to only surround myself with people that inspired me. I didn't know it then, but that one small decision would completely change the rest of my life. And one kid came to mind. His name was Johnny. And I said, Johnny, let's make a movie. The problem was we had no idea what we wanted to make a movie about. There were so many things that we wanted to do, but we hadn't done them because they were buried. We were buried by work, by school, by life, and we had moments of inspiration, but eventually those became buried by the day-to-day. We asked the question, what do you want to do before you die? And with that, we made a list of our buried dreams. Right? We just decided to make the most epic bucket list of all time. So if anything were possible, what would you do? And the list items that I was convinced were impossible have somehow been checked off. Well, we would make our own TV show, write a #1 New York Times bestseller, tell a judge you want the truth, you can't handle the truth, walk away from an explosion in slow motion, and have a beer with Prince Harry. We also made a promise. Every item we crossed off our bucket list, we'd help a complete stranger do something on their list.
I wanted to find a story in Utah, a story of helping someone else do something that they want to do. And we found an incredible story with the help of the university. And it's proof that sometimes it doesn't take much to make a huge impact.
We have this really cool thing for you tonight because you're such an amazing person.
We know how much you love basketball.
Yes. Yes. So they made you your own jersey.
Yes. No. On behalf of the Jazz, we're very excited to have you here and we're going to present you with your own number 12 Utah Jazz jerseys.
If he can do that, I can do anything.
So oddly enough, it's not these big list items that mean the most. It's been the times when we've helped other people do what they love that remain the highlight. And it all started with the bucket list. We asked the question, what do you want to do before you die? And the list items that I was convinced were impossible have somehow been checked off. List items like number 95, play basketball with President Obama at the White House, sit with Oprah. And we even crossed off, have a beer with Prince Harry. Just know that there will be ups and there will be downs. There will be times when you struggle. We're all human beings. And when you hit that struggle, know this, you are not alone. Our struggles can be our strengths when we embrace them rather than try to hide them. Because this is our true self. And who you truly are is exactly who you need to be. Now take a second to think about your secret dream, right? What is it? And now that you're thinking about it, how do you accomplish it? I only know 5 things. Here are the 5 steps to making the impossible possible. Write down your dream. You take an idea and you make it real. You're effectively breathing life into your dreams. You've begun to prioritize your goals. Studies show that people that write down their goals are 40% more likely to succeed. It's an easy 40%. Take it. If you don't talk about your dreams, no one can help you. And I guarantee help will show up in the most unexpected ways. Some people don't talk about their biggest dreams because they're afraid of what other people might think, or they're afraid of failure. Well, failure is usually a course correction to success. Persist. You fail because you stop trying. Success depends on consistency of effort as much as it does of quality of work. You can produce great work and not have it recognized. Trying again and again makes all the difference. Step 4, take moonshots. Quite simply, a big dream motivates you to get out of bed every morning, and it attracts the best people and best talent by your side. You want those people standing next to you. And finally, step 5, give. When people see you out in the world helping others, they want to help you. Jim Carrey says, the effect you have on others is the most valuable currency there is. It's the times when I've stepped into someone else's life in a moment that means so much to them, like our friend Doug. that I know will stick with me until I die. By doing what you love, you inspire other people to do what they love. And that ripple effect goes far beyond what you'll ever know. It's time for you to track your true, original course. Because today is the youngest you will ever be.
And she says the most offensive thing to me that you can say to a person of color in the United States of America. She asks me, "Were you born in this country?" And I was immediately offended. I put my hands on my hips and I said, "Yeah, I was born in this country." She then goes on to ask me, "How old are you?" I said, 19 years old. She says, "Are you married?" I said, "No, ma'am." She says, "Do you have any kids?" I said, "No, ma'am." "And may I help you find something?" She then goes on to tell me something that changed my life forever. She says, "You look like you could be the next Miss USA." And I laughed at this woman hysterically. I said, "Lady, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm going into my sophomore year at Virginia State. I'm about to commission in 3 years, go on active duty, be a military officer." Somehow, this crazy woman convinced me to meet her at Starbucks the very next day. She brought this foot-tall stack of pageant books, and she goes on to convince me to compete in my very first pageant. I compete in my first pageant 3 months later, and I lose. I go back the second year, compete in my state pageant, and I lose. I go back the third year, compete in my state pageant, and I lose. Go back the fourth year, compete in my state pageant and lose. Go back the fifth year, compete in my state pageant and lose. But guess what happens the sixth year? I lose. I called her on the phone 6 years after our Target conversation, and I said, "You told me I could be the next Miss USA." And she says, "Deshauna, keep trying, keep trying, keep trying." In June of 2015, this amazing, kind of cuckoo woman passes away from leukemia. In December 2015, I win Miss District of Columbia, USA. In June 2016, I'm crowned the first soldier to win Miss USA. And last January in Manila, Philippines, I walked the Miss Universe stage and placed top 9 amongst 86 countries. Do not fear failure, but please be terrified of regret. When you walk out this door into the real world, you will receive a lot of shut doors, a lot of turned down applications. You will hear way more no's than you hear yeses. Giving up is something I did a lot of growing up, and I don't think I really challenged myself to stick anything through until I joined the track team in middle school. I remember having to ask my mom after tryouts and making it to the team for my very first pair of track shoes. Now, at the time, she walks into our house and she has a bag that has a nice Nike check sign on it. So I get excited because I wasn't getting new shoes very often. I go to take the shoe box out the bag and I notice that it says a size 9 on it. Mind you, in the 7th grade, I was a size 5. I open the box and I slide my feet into the shoe and I look at my mother and I said, "These shoes are too big." She says, "I know, I did that on purpose." I was like, "Why would you buy shoes that are too big on purpose, Mom?" And she says, "Because I know that you're going to grow into them." Coach has us line up on the starting line and he wants us to run a lap around the track. As we go to take off, I immediately fall to the ground, twist my ankle because the shoes are entirely too big. See, I couldn't run at the speed that I wanted to because I didn't fit the shoes I was wearing at the time. Now, many of us have goals we're trying to achieve, but the person we are right now is not the person that we need to be when we cross the finish line to our dreams. So we must walk and pace ourselves on this journey to our goals because we haven't grown enough in ourselves to fit the shoes that we need to achieve our aspirations. But let me tell you something. If I had won Miss USA my very first year, I I would not have been Miss USA. I would not have been the version of myself that I needed to be to properly handle a national title. Many of us aren't ready to walk the race. But understand that as we walk this race, we pace ourselves, and as we pace ourselves, we grow. And as we grow, our foot gets bigger, and as our foot gets bigger, our shoes begin to fill, and as our shoes begin to fill, we can now run a little bit faster, and as we pick up the pace, we get to the finish line at the exact time we are destined to cross it. Do not fear the word no, but be afraid of the possibility of a yes that you have prematurely destroyed because you decided to quit before the clock strikes 12. There are a lot of questions that is going to keep you up at night, but I guarantee there isn't one question that will keep you up longer at night than the question, what if I didn't give up?
I grew up in Ireland. My father, Tom Brosnan, well, he left when I was an infant. It was not a good time to be a single mother. But my mother was courageous in her determination to make a better life for us both. And thus, she left the shores of Ireland to become a nurse in England. Such a decision came a number of years of separation and heartache. At the age of 4, I went to live with my grandparents. After they passed on, I ended up living with a friend of the family. Eileen Riley was her name. Eileen was a saint of a woman to me. She was a classic Irish woman with an apron wrapped around her full figure that was always covered in baking powder. I lived upstairs in a room that I shared with 2 other lodgers. There was some sadness and longing. I remember how she wept. The day I left her, I was 11 years old. My life began again that day as I traveled alone on the plane to London with rosary beads in one hand and an empty aspirin bottle filled with holy water in the other. Once there, fresh off the plane with a thick Irish brogue. For some reason, they could not or would not say my name, Pierce, so I was known as Irish. Each and every day, trying to find my footing in this new landscape of prejudice and racism, learning words I'd never known and never wanted to know. I learned to assimilate. It was, in some ways, my first acting job, to be someone else. And eventually, I found people I didn't need to act for. I found friends who accepted me, brogue and all, friends who called me by my name, on my own. I had learned to survive, but through friendship, I learned to thrive. Those boys' acceptance, Eileen's generosity, my mother's sacrifice, that is what got me through my childhood. I can tell you this, wherever you're going, you won't get there alone. I certainly didn't. It's easy to feel overwhelmed or daunted by the challenges facing our world. In those moments when you feel outmatched, you need people you can turn to. You need people who can support you, who can swell spirits, who can pick you up and dust you off and set you right. And once you're ready to get back into the fight, you will need people to stand by your side. Our world doesn't need a lone hero out to solve things solo. Our world doesn't need a hero who only chases adventure and glamour. We need people who have a passion and a sense of a mission. My own environmental awareness and activism were born out of a love of nature, a love for the ocean, and the love of a great woman, namely my wife, Keely. My wife and I helped save the last pristine breeding ground of the California gray whales. That is our passion. That is our mission. Many in your position have sought the route of the flashy, exciting, or adventurous. They've taken the high-powered job or the well-regarded profession because they want the thrill that comes with first-class cabins, penthouse suites, and swanky clothes. Well, I have worn the tuxedo, so I can tell you this. Our world doesn't need you to chase the super spy lifestyle. It needs you to find a passion and a mission. Greatness doesn't come from destruction. It comes from the courage to create, to see the opportunity we have been given, to seize it and to build the future. You are the architects and the engineers of a new tomorrow. And like no species before us, you have the power to shape the future. So when you leave here today, I urge you to pursue something that is exacting to you as it is important to the world. Make something that matters. The world needs your will, it needs your imagination, your courage, your appetite for adventure. It needs your hands and your minds and your hearts. Our world doesn't need a hero with a license to kill. We need people with the courage to create. You have before you the most singular opportunity for greatness ever offered to any generation. So take it. Rise up. Save the world.
45 minutes is exactly how long it took to transform my life. My father and I were involved in a terrible boating accident 3 miles beyond the Golden Gate Bridge in open ocean. Our boat of 20 years capsized and sank, dumping the two of us into the shark-infested 55-degree cold waters of the Pacific. Our boat was sinking fast, but he was able to make a single 911 phone call that reached the operator, who said they would contact help. We never knew if help was coming, as our phones died as soon as we hit the saltwater. We spent 45 minutes together in the ocean, desperately swimming for the land on the horizon, racing against the effects of hypothermia. Our only hope was to reach land before we went unconscious from the cold and perished in the waves. The human fight or flight response is a powerful force and does interesting things to your mind. To sustain my motivation, I focused my mind on a singular thought that drove me. The feeling of joy a person experiences from new love is unparalleled in strength and is the pinnacle of human emotion. Luckily for me, Kelly, my girlfriend of 6 months, lived in Scottsdale. I focused 100% of my mind on the joy I would feel from seeing her again after I reached land. The 911 operator got through to the Coast Guard, who sent a rescue helicopter, which miraculously plucked us from the sea. We were treated for hypothermia and sent home that night. Still lacking composure, I called Kelly and told her what had happened, and that she was the joy in my life that fueled my swim. I felt something unexpected when my boat went down. I'll never forget how serene and calm being in the ocean was, and the feeling of euphoria I felt during my swim when I faced my own potential death. Fear did not exist in that moment. As so many young people do, I was struggling to find purpose in my life and create passion for something I believed in. I found purpose that day. I often felt like I had a surplus of time until I was faced with losing all of it at once and realized that it is the scarcest resource in the world. All fear of change, lost relationships, personal failure, and self-doubt became irrelevant when facing death. Like the waves of the ocean I faced, we will all likely face waves of adversity throughout the rest of both our personal and professional lives. If you have a passion, act on it today. There is no time to waste. If you are ever caught on a sinking ship, or just get a sinking feeling in life, always remember that with a little luck, and through absolute resolve and massive action, you alone have the power to create your own path.